Hello, everybody. So experimentation, super important. Thank you, my Fred, for giving me the perfect slot after lunch. So I'm experimenting with a new format of the presentation in and of itself. There are a couple of studies that may refer to some things I will touch upon, and you issued a challenge to the speakers, but I didn't really hear anybody actually do that. So I did find a couple of stickies there that I will refer to. But I'm going to talk today about experimentation, which is where the rubber hits the road when it comes to innovation. We talk about it should be done, the boardroom needs to buy into it, the leaders need to buy into it, but eventually at the end of the day, it's all about reducing the risk of new ideas failing. And how do you do that? You run experiments. So today, well, let me just give you a bit of intro where I come from first. This place. Anybody been to Cyprus? Hey, yeah, I know you've been to Cyprus. So yeah, I come from Limassol in Cyprus, and I'm very happy to be here, not just because it's first time in Australia, but just be in person, because this is where I live, this studio, right? And I'm just constantly in there, and obviously I'm a tech geek, and we do a lot of great stuff. So the silver lining of COVID for me is that it allowed me to not only virtually beam into my clients' rooms, but also beam home more frequently. Because I traveled about 150 days a year, but during COVID, I had two kids, and they're not twins. It just, the damn pandemic lasted for 3 years. So, so I've also gained a new skill, which is really bad dad jokes as a result of it. Now, if you haven't been to Cyprus, this is my country. It looks like a pork chop. In fact, we're so proud of its shape. We're the only country in the world that actually made that the flag. And so if you don't know a few things about Cyprus, shame on you if you don't know halloumi comes from there, but who knows halloumi? Yay for our marketing agency and finally getting the patents for it. The other thing about Cyprus is we're a small country, 1.2 million, but we welcome a lot of tourists. So if you haven't come, please join us. This trip is sponsored by the tourist agency. And then the other thing is, fun fact, the oldest wine in the world, Commandaria, is made in Cyprus. But more fun is that I think similar to what you suffer with kangaroos, from what I heard, we have more stray cats than people. So if you're a cat person, come to Cyprus. So in the next 30 minutes, here's what I'm going to talk about. Here's a few topics just to keep them on your radar. MVPs. We're going to talk about MVPs, and I'm going to have fun demystifying the acronym. Then we're going to talk about making assumptions, which is a very risky business. So how do you go about using experiments to de-risk your business ideas? The mentality around business experiments, which I will refer to as checkbox versus innovators. So the mentality in and of itself suffers tremendously. So maybe you'll recognize some of that when I talk about it. And then I'll talk about the expertise that you may require to conduct business experiments. Basically, what to do when you don't know what to do. And that's a few stickies up there. We need resources, we need help. What kind of help can we find? So I'll be covering that there. I will end with 7 hopefully practical tips of things you can do starting tomorrow to improve your experimentation culture. In my words, to be more like a startup when you go back to work. But I will be doing this as an experiment using prototype walks into a bar jokes. Now, you might get them or not. Maybe you'll give me a sympathy laugh, but let's go with the first one. A prototype walks into a bar, all arrogant and confident. What can I get you, prototype, says the bartender. It's Mr. VP to you. So, lesson 1, too many times we take a buzzword and we abuse it. In this case, it's MVP. In the world of business, I wondered as I was preparing for this presentation, how else is this acronym used and what can we learn from business if we were to dig into it? So really, I was given the after lunch slot and I thought, you know what, I'll have some fun on my own. So it could be maximum vain production, which is a product that's created solely for the creator's ego and has no practical use for anyone else. Case in point, the Louis Vuitton punching bag. $175,000 worth of absolute vanity just to prove you have the money to afford it. So these are all going to be some business failures, by the way. The most valuable prototype is another way to use MVP, which is the prototype that has every bell and whistle, looks like it's ready for market, but actually doesn't work as intended. So here's the Sinclair C5, 1985, a battery-powered vehicle with 3 wheels that was supposed to revolutionize personal transportation, was met with an infinite amount of problems and issues and design constraints and all sorts of stuff. It didn't work out. But 16 years later, the Segway, which was meant to revolutionize personal transportation and also was met with a demise. However, Dean Cain, who is the inventor of the Segway, was an idol of mine growing up. And like Tendai had mentioned in his presentation, Dean is an inventor, not an innovator. So although it didn't come to the business model of revolutionizing personal transportation, who's been on a Segway scooter tour when you visited another city? There you go. So there is some value in it still. But both of these fail, not was intended, just great prototypes. It could be the most visible product. It's one of my favorites. So this product is so extravagant that it overshadows the competition in the news, but nobody actually wants to buy it. Meet the Juicero. This amazing device that costs $700 and takes counter space in your kitchen takes the juice out of juice packs that are environmentally unfriendly. It basically does this. Newsworthy? Maybe. Valuable? I don't think so. It could be, MVP could stand for maximum volume production, which is the product that's made in mass quantities without any concern for validation, just because we're so confident we're going to do it. Meet New Coke. And this was in the 80s, a new formula that was supposed to take over the old formula, no testing whatsoever, and Coca-Cola had to deal with mass amounts of inventory that had to be thrown away. It could be the most vulnerable production, which is a product that's rushed to market without proper testing or quality control, making it prone to massive recalls. Who in the room has a Samsung Galaxy Note 7? Thank you. Because the batteries explode. That was 2016. In the last one I have is the Maximum Vanity Project. And this is a project that started with the best intentions, but quickly spirals into a passion project that nobody has the decency to stop. Michael, maybe those are the projects from the architecture, the domicile projects, vanity projects. So Quibi, which was supposed to replace Netflix and short films streamed and all that kind of stuff, got so much traction, and the celebrities that were kind of supporting it, it became a vanity project. They ended up blowing 1.8 billion of investors' dollars. This is early 2020. And Alex Osterwalder, who loves this case study and presents it, in one of his masterclasses, one person in the audience said, I worked at Quibi, double that number. Okay, and here's the final one, the most vicious patent. This is the patent that's so broad and all-encompassing that prevents anybody else from making anything remotely similar, even if it's better. Did you know the pinch to zoom action is patented by Apple? And how many billions were spent in court with battles between Samsung and other companies and Apple? Can we please also do this? Right? So there's many ways you can use or abuse the acronym. Some of them are actually good, like, for example, the minimum viable price, which is a business modeling tactic to get market share. So it's the product that's priced so low, it's actually a loss for the company, but allows the company to get traction in market share. That's the case with the first Kindle. It was $399, was making a loss for Amazon, but carved the way to the ebook market. So I had a lot of fun putting this together, but really what I want to talk about is a minimum viable product. And what is the purpose that MVPs serve in the context of innovation? The definition by Eric Ries is that a minimum viable product is the version of a new product that allows the team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least amount of effort. It's not about launching your MVP and having a great prototype or rushing to make a pilot, which is what most corporates think when we talk about experimenting. They think it's a fully fledged pilot in just one instead of all markets. It's something that gets you learning at a very early stage. So it's minimum because you're probably testing only 20% of the features you dream of. It is viable because it does the job even though it may be ugly, and I'll talk about ugliness in a moment. And it's a product or service because it feels tangible enough to allow your customers to experience the value that you might be testing. This is Zappos.com 20 years ago. That's the website. You guys know Zappos.com? So the first site that was called shoesites.com was created by Nick Willowitz, I think the last name. And what he did was he put up this site. This was the anniversary edition that Zappos put up after 20 years. So it looked roughly like this. And what happened was that he waited for somebody to purchase shoes that he had posted pictures of. Then he would go out and go to a shoe store and buy the shoe and go to USPS and ship it. By the time he came back home, there was a few more shoe orders. He would go out again and do that. And at some point, he realized, holy crap, this thing is working. Maybe I need to build it. 1.2 billion acquisition by Amazon. This is Air Bed and Breakfast, which if you didn't know, that's what Airbnb stands for. It's two designers in San Francisco offering their Air Bed in a design conference that had every single hotel booked. And so they said, why don't we offer this option to other people too? Just the minimum stuff. We'll create a map. You can put a pin where you are, and you can say what you offer. Air bed, single bed, whatever. You're offering a space in your room, other designers of the conference. And that's how Airbnb was started. But there's more interesting experiments that I find also quite amazing that companies like this would actually conduct these experiments. Papa John's Pizza, this is an actual experiment, MVP. Brian, your next automated pizza delivery is scheduled for Saturday, February 25th at 12 p.m. To confirm, text yes. To decline, text no. Text help for help, says the bot. Now, did you get what the value proposition is here? Seems like Brian or Papa John's has a feature that allows you to have automated pizza delivery. For example, every Saturday at noon, I want you to send me a pizza. Would anybody want that, have that value proposition? Yeah, okay, you would. Some people may. So Papa John, has this feature that you can do that. But they will say, before we send that pizza, just in case you change your mind, we'll send you a message that you have to confirm with a yes or a no. Thank you, Papa John, you handsome man. I shall call you the carbs vixen, says Brian, because he wants to have fun with the bot. We're sorry, we didn't understand. Please confirm or decline, says the bot. When I make love, I imagine you tossing some dough shirtless, says Brian. Dude, our automated system isn't set up yet. This is a real person texting you. I make minimum wage. Please just tell me if you want the damn pizza. Right? This is an MVP, also known as a Wizard of Oz experiment, where you don't have to build the code, write a single line of code. You have somebody else making minimum wage pretend to do that. So, okay, there you have it. But then sometimes people ask me, but Paris, it's great when it's a service. I can imagine lots of ways you can test it. How would you test it if it was something like a product? And you go to the ultimate extreme and say, how would you prototype a car? That must be expensive. It's exactly what Tesla did. Tesla's strategy from the beginning was to enter the market of electronic cars that run 100% on electricity, but to first prove the point that they're better than the ones that run on gas. And they said, we're going to create a sports car, the Tesla Roadster. This is their prototype, which they didn't build. Lotus has a car called the Lotus Elise that they rent to other companies who wish to experiment, and this becomes what's so-called a mule. And so Tesla used this car pretending it was a Tesla, changed the logo and all the symbols and all that stuff, and started running experiments with consumers to understand where they can improve the value proposition of a car that was supposed to be $100,000 when it first launched. So if you want to, it is possible to run prototyping, experimenting on absolutely everything. You ready for another joke? A prototype walks into a bar looking sad. My gut tells me you need a whiskey. Do you serve all your customers based on indigestion? And here the lesson is, most of what we think to be true is probably based on assumptions. So we assume certain things are to be true. So let me ask you this. How does a dog drink water? I'm running this experiment now with you. Can you show me with your hand, please? How does a dog drink water? Like, what does the motion? Tongue? Everybody. You have to all do it. Show everybody at your table. Why 2 tongues? What? Do you see we have different answers? Right, so that calls for an experiment. Even if we all had the same answer in my world, that calls for an experiment. But how would you test this? If you wanted to figure out how a dog drinks water, shout it out. What would you do? You have a dog. What else? Water. And what would you do? Film it. How? So do you have a slow motion camera? Aren't those expensive? Everybody has a slow motion camera. Maybe you could also put a glass bowl so you can see the tongue. Maybe like this. Let's have a look. For those of you who thought that the tongue makes this kind of cup, you were wrong. And now you can sleep better at night knowing the answer to this so most important question, that the tongue makes an inverse cup and not just in German Shepherds. Yeah, I've tried it with my dog and other dogs. I'm not a cat person. You can do it if you're a cat person. But that's weird to me because for my whole life, I thought that it was like this. It makes sense. I had no idea that it was like that. So the lesson here is that there's a lot of things we believe to be true. And I think when it comes to innovation or really anything in life, you should test it. Whenever you have a chance, test it, especially when you find that people disagree. Now, you've seen by now the process of going from an idea to a business and the search and test loop that Tendai and Lucy had mentioned as well. I'm in the business of helping companies reduce risk. So in the search phase, we're going to reduce the risk. And as we reduce the risk, we increase our confidence. Because we increase our confidence, we're willing to spend more money. And therefore, we have a metered funding approach. Your first experiment is going to cost very little down here, if not nothing. And as you increase your confidence, you start spending more and more and more. And eventually, you make the decision based on the evidence you have if you're going to proceed with launching this product or and so on and so forth. So if we were to look at this and then take the same framework and talk about the look of an MVP when you do a launch with it, what should an MVP look like? A blobfish is what comes to mind. I actually Googled the ugliest fish in the world, and this is no joke. This isn't AI. This is a fish that looks like that. When you first launch an MVP, if you're not ashamed of what it looks like, you've launched too late. Now, imagine in corporates, all the emotions that go with that statement, the shame, what people will say, how they will judge you. And so you need to understand that part of this is mindset and mentality. You need to rush to do a controlled launch of something. As you can spend more money because you generated evidence, it starts to look a little bit better. Maybe not that much, but a little bit better than a blobfish. Eventually, when you execute, it might be a red crown-tail beta, which is voted the most beautiful fish in the world. And I found it so amazing that even in nature, the fish has beta in its name. Something to think about. So what you would want to do is do controlled launches along the way. Launches that might be for a few days just to get knee-jerk reactions, whether those are customer interviews or in-person pop-up stores or anything that you can test your value, 20% of it, and get some feedback. Okay, so what should we test first, you might be thinking? And then we go into this framework that's borrowed by IDEO and fits beautifully over the business model canvas. If you take desirability, feasibility, viability, and I'll talk about adaptability in a second. Otherwise, as my friend Tendai says, the illities. Here's your categories of risk. The first one is feasibility, which is, can we build it? The second is desirability. Does anybody want it? Then you have viability, which is, will this make money? And adaptability, which is around the business model, is, will it fit in the business model environment of today, and can it scale? Now think about it for a second. If you ask mid-level engineers, what should we test first? Shout it out. What are they going to say? Feasibility, right? Can we build it? If you ask leaders, what should we test first? Viability. Who's testing desirability? Marketing? Nobody. In most cases, I find that nobody's testing desirability. But the question becomes, if you can prove that there is an incredible amount of demand, and you have evidence to substantiate that, won't your leaders say, let's just put some resources behind this and find a way to build it? Like everything starts to fall into place. So that's part of the equation, is understanding your areas of risk and where do you start. And adaptability comes usually at a later stage when you say, what else is going on? Macroeconomy, micro competition, and all that kind of stuff. So what we say is what needs to be true for our idea to work, and we start to create with the wonderful tools, all sorts of different things. But if you're real about it, all you've done is you've put a bunch of statis full of hypotheses, assumptions. So first you come to the point when you recognize that everything you've designed is a bunch of assumptions and you need to go out and test them. So building on what Lucy showed this morning, the way you go about that is you first rank them on important assumptions, basically the ones that if they're not true, the entire idea collapses. To unimportant assumptions, the ones that we can find alternatives for. And then you also look at them on, we have evidence for these assumptions, or we have zero evidence for these assumptions. And then you map them. And once you do that, that's your answer. That's what you test first. So this is a critical part in the experimentation process. And then you say, well, what can I do? What kind of experiment? Well, we have drafted 44 business experiments, all of which are in the Testing Business Ideas book. There's many more than 44, and anything else you can think of that can help you conduct experiments. For example, if you're in a discovery mindset and you're looking to see kind of desirability mostly, here's a bunch of experiments in discovery, and you can see that they're ranked by cost, setup time, runtime, and evidence strength, because each experiment has varying degrees of evidence strength. And then you have a list of validation experiments that you can run. These are all in the book, and they're extremely useful to get you as a starting point to start thinking, what experiment can we run? And the idea is that you go from an idea to an executable business idea through the loop, the design loop that Lucy was talking about this morning, and you continuously go through these sort of motions until you reduce the risk to a level that you're satisfied with. Number 3, a prototype walks into a bar, anxious and in a rush. Give me the first thing on the menu, but that's the bar's logo. That'll do. And you go, okay. So some people have a checkbox mentality when it comes to experimenting. Oh, we need to do experiments? How about this one? Okay, that'll do. Have you done experiments? Yeah, we've done experiments. Nobody's asking what did you find out and what went wrong. If you have an innovator's mentality, it's a different story. You're really kind of, you wake up in the morning and all you want to do is learn, and you're very comfortable conducting multiple experiments on the same assumption, even though the first experiment you run showed you were right, which is a key thing here, right? A lot of times I see innovation teams run an experiment, get encouraged by the results, and stop. But when you run it from a different perspective, maybe you'll see a circle instead of a square, right? So that's something that you need to kind of understand, that it's not a checkbox mentality. Just like using the tools, if you use them like a checkbox, you're using them wrong. So here's some examples. I'm very proud to be participating in the largest Green Ideas competition in the world, which we started 10 years ago, and this year is the 10th edition. Australia has been in it for the last couple of years, actually. And we collect green business ideas from 61 countries. It's like the biggest Eurovision contest kind of thing. We started this way back in 2014 as part of an initiative that I'm involved in with the European Union. And all these startups come in, and this is our motto: we're fixing climate change one startup at a time. So I train 200 to 300 startups every year when it comes to this particular agenda that I'm very passionate about. Here's an example of one of the startups. They want to do a device or a product that prolongs the shelf life of fruit. I think it's a sticker. And their assumption is that they believe that people from Lithuania who travel at least monthly will show interest in our product through filling out a survey on our website, because we asked them to run an experiment. And they go and they create this landing page. And they have a landing page. The call to action is fill a survey. You might have somebody come into your house and twist your arm, and you're still not willing to do a survey. Why would you go on a landing page and click a call to action to fill a survey? Because you have checkbox mentality. But sometimes digital is not the solution. Sometimes analog is better. So when they eventually realized nobody was clicking, not a single person, they just did a tear-out sheet, went to the different areas that were point of sale interest for their potential customers, and then they came back after a week and saw how many people tore one of those sheets to get more information about our product. And they got a lot more valid learning. So experiment validity and not a checkbox mentality is absolutely key. So let's test that on you. Get some A4 paper, not A4. You have an A5 pad in front of you. Let's do a little exercise together. So I'm going to ask you on your piece of paper to basically do a big cross like so. This exercise is going to go really super fast. So in the top left quadrant, the one I'm indicating here, keep yours clean. In the top left quadrant, I'd like for you to draw a house, please, in 7 seconds. Draw a house. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. That was your house. Good. In this top right quadrant, I would like for you to, this time, draw a house that's different from the first house you drew. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Let's go to the bottom right. Now, when it comes to below the x-axis, we're going to do something different. You're going to draw a house that's different from the top two that you drew. Ready? Go. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you haven't figured it out, vastly different than anything else, the bottom left quadrant, draw a house in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please take a look at the houses your friends drew at your table, especially the first one they drew, and tell me if they're about the same. Is that your house? Now take a look at the fourth house they drew. So tell me about your fourth house. What do you have? What do you have? A boat. You have a boat for a fourth house. You have a tree for a tree house. A tree house. Anybody have an igloo? You have an igloo. Anybody have a tent, a teepee? Teepee? What are the chances you would have done an igloo for your first house? None. Not limited. None. Zero. There's no way you would have done a teepee for your first house. And what does your first house look like? If you think you put a chimney and you're innovative, you're hallucinating. Or 2 windows and you're better? No, you're hallucinating. We're all having the same dream. Okay? So this is innovation the way most people see it. What we have is the wrong type of attitude. What we have is a decision attitude. What we come to is say, what are the obvious alternatives out there? And this is the danger in the world now. What did ChatGPT tell me? And let me get creative as a result of it, which is in danger now. Creativity is at risk. And Michael, this is going to be your thing to talk about later. But this is an area where you have a decision attitude for the most part. But what we need to understand is we need to start looking at a designer's approach. What are the potential alternatives? And so what I do with my teams when I'm coaching them is I always do this exercise, and I always tell them, we're going to go on an adventure for the next 3 months looking for the fourth house. And maybe that's the one we pick, maybe not, but at the end of the day, one way or another, we're going to have a lot of learning come our way. So that is an innovator's attitude as opposed to a checklist attitude. A prototype walks into a bar, dressed as a WordPress template. What can I get you started on today? How about a menu? Okay, so this is the most popular business experiment out there, the landing page. Have any of you have interacted with or been involved in? Yeah. So a landing page. Why? Because the landing page you can build it relatively fast. It really helps you align on what your value proposition is. You can conduct the experiment and bundle it with others. So you can have 2 versions of the landing page and do an A/B test. You can do Facebook ad campaigns to bring people to your landing page. On your landing page, you can do an explainer video or some animation. You'd need to have a logo. You'd need to have all sorts of things. So as I go into this conversation, maybe you realize that it's not so easy to build a landing page, but it's very useful to build a landing page nowadays to conduct experiments. So I'm going to use this as an example where I'm going to show you maybe why corporates have a difficult time building experiments. So let's take a startup to begin with. Biodegradable acoustic panels. They believe that 10 amateur musicians in Greece, and they define that age group, will pre-order the product through our landing page, and they do this landing page, which was an early version, eventually had 2 pictures to show the different panel sizes. Would anybody buy from this site or click to order? And if not, why not? Why not? It doesn't seem secure. There's a privacy error. So let's go through some of the typical things that as a corporate you probably don't know. Because A, you're not a startup, And B, you're not a Gen Z person in the position you hold right now. So you don't know how to make landing pages, very likely. So then you start to wonder, what should I know? Well, first you need to buy a domain. Let me ask you, how long would it take a corporate to purchase a domain name? Weeks? A startup, 3 seconds. I find it, and when I talk to startups, many times somebody may have an idea because we mentioned something, and as I look at them, they're already on GoDaddy and purchasing the domain, right? $2. I'll just decide later if I want it or not. Right? So that's an issue. The other thing is when I see corporates, finding a domain name, this is what they get. They go to the free ones and they go like, I'm going to run an experiment. It's going to have .wix on it. Well, nobody's going to click on it because they know it's an experiment, dummy. Like, what's the point? Then you have hosting. Oh, we're going to get IT involved. We're going to put it on our servers. Sorry to break it to you, but 53% of your visitors will leave your website if it takes them more than 3 seconds to load, and likely you have the slowest servers on the planet compared to what actual servers look like for websites. So that opens a can of worms. Who's going to approve the PO to buy hosting servers when we already have one? And that's what my leaders are going to say. As I go through this, play those dialogues into what can go wrong when you're doing experiments back at work. Then you have the notorious SSL certificate, which may be $150 to purchase. You need an expert to install it so you don't get the HTTPS privacy error, which is going to kill the experiment. Then you have in Europe GDPR compliance, which is all about the data privacy. Do you have something similar or maybe brewing in Australia? Well, it's a big thing in Europe, right? So in Germany, for example, if you don't have an imprint on your website, which is exactly your address and the nature of business you do, you go to jail. You ever thought about that? Like, you actually launch a website, go to jail. I wasn't even selling porn. This was really good stuff. No, you didn't have an imprint, my friend. So there's a lot of things you don't know. And we're just talking something simple. Like for a 15-year-old, this is like 2 minutes. Analytics. Well, if you're going to launch an experiment, you might as well analyze data. Well, how? What's a heat map? What's a scroll map? Oh, Google Analytics. That's enough. And that's probably what you'll do. Design. 94% of first impressions are design related. 55% of users spend less than 15 seconds on websites that don't have a user interface that's conducive to what it should be. So if you're the one building the website so you can save money or because you don't have a budget approved, good luck with getting it right. And then you go, oh, on top of that, we need to have good content, right? So it's all the stuff you'll do in a workshop, and maybe you need to build some sort of video, and you need to have a logo and a name for this thing you're testing. So when you start to think about that, most of my clients say, that's okay, we'll hire a marketing agency. 8 months later, $100,000 later, they have a website. Because that's not how they think. The agency is going to think of a fully fledged product, and they have a reputation to protect. That's not how they think. We're talking prototypes here. So here's a real example of a landing page for an actual corporate client, one of my clients. And this is made in WordPress, delivery time under 72 hours when you know what you're talking about. But it's not just landing pages. You have lots of different experiments, like customer value scenes, which are storyboards we use to conduct interviews. And if you want to know how to talk to people and conduct interviews in a very systematic way, tomorrow we have a workshop I'm running with Christian to exactly discuss this. And you'll go through a simulation where you create storyboards and do simulated interviews to see how to talk to people. So if that's interesting to you, I just put a plug there, Christian. So hopefully we get some people. And then on top of customer value scenes, you also have whiteboard videos or animation type of videos or 3D printed prototypes, or you may have tear out sheets that are quite analog, or analytics. So there's so many things that you need to be able to track. The reality, folks, is that a corporate startup is not a startup. Sorry to break it to you. But even if you want to do it and you have the sort of the tenacity to say we can figure this out, likely in the first time you try it, it's not going to work for you. Because unless you have startup founders there and they know these tools, it's going to be a very difficult uphill battle to go through all the different steps. So as a result of this, for my clients, I created a service called Prototype Concierge that we help them do that. So we go, okay, you're paying us anyway to do this innovation thing. We'll build the experiments for you. And from what I hear, there's already agencies like that locally in Australia that can also help you do that. So if you're thinking, and that's the answer to the sticky, how do I get the resources to be able to start experimenting or doing something back at work? Get the help. Don't try to do it your own the first time round. So here is, as I wrap up, 7 things that I think you can try tomorrow to help you become more of a startup when you go back to the office. First one is assign external coaches to teams. It's a huge and a steep learning curve. And what is really helpful for teams is for the first couple of times they do it, to have somebody who's been down that path, because you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what questions to ask. And that's why I think coaches can be very instrumental to those teams. Approve a budget for experimentation. In a typical discovery sense, about 5,000, let's say 7,500 Australian dollars is more than enough to test an idea. That's landing page videos, all that kind of stuff. Right? So if you go to the right agency, because if you're building a website with a marketing agency, it's a totally different budget. And so if you don't have that, what you get is demotivation, bottlenecks, and teams that are just frustrated. How am I going to test this if you're not going to give me the money to do so? Adobe, for example, does this kickbox program. You get a credit card for $1,000 and you don't need to get receipts or approvals. Go out and spend, experiment. So build a program like that. Avoid the checkbox mentality, which is what I spoke about earlier. So look for that fourth house by doing multiple experiments from different perspectives and have an innovator's mindset as opposed to I'm doing it for the sake of doing it. Involve other internal stakeholders early. So this, for me, has been one of the biggest success factors in innovation teams being able to actually launch their products at the end, is because at the very beginning, they went to key decision stakeholders and they got feedback from them, created buy-in, and they were quite keenly interested to see the progress of these ideas as they went through. A little hack that I can help you with is, because sometimes there's politics in territories. So why are you talking to that C-level person when in the jury they're not involved? Oh, I went to get feedback for my presentation. Maybe. And so many teams do that. Can we pitch this to you so you can tell us what you think before we pitch it to the jury? And they get feedback, but they also go, oh, this is interesting in North America. Why don't you tell us? We have something similar brewing. And so especially big clients, they don't know what they know too many times. And so that's really important. Getting legal on board, you don't have to you don't want to be in a position where you're waiting for, I don't know, 12 weeks to get the language of your terms and conditions that need to go on a landing page when you're sprinting. Get that stuff out of the way in the beginning. So what's that checklist, right? So you have to think about all these things and get ready before you begin. And then having one virtual whiteboard for collaboration is extremely important in this space of innovation. Whether it's Miro, Strategyzer's app, or anything else where there's one source of truth, it helps you work with external consultants as well, as opposed to I can't give you access to my SharePoint for 5 weeks because IT hasn't done it yet, right? And all that kind of stuff. And the final one is give the team autonomous decision authority. Do not expect them, just because you're the innovation leader, to always come to you for spending or anything else. You've given them, let's say, 3 months to sprint, let them sprint. And that increases their engagement and ownership in the task. That concludes it. But if you have more space, I can try one more joke. Yeah? All right. Prototype walks into a bar wearing aviator glasses. What's up with the Tom Cruise look, buddy? Shh, I'm pretending to be a pilot. Thank you.